There was a man named Marcus who understood silence better than most. He was not the kind to raise his voice. He did not argue. He did not make scenes. He was the type who could stand in a room full of noise and somehow remain untouched by it, like water rolling off stone. When people yelled at him, he would simply nod once. When they tried to break him with their words, he would lower his eyes for just a heartbeat, then lift them again, steady, unshaken, holding something unbreakable inside. Most people in Los Angeles did not see Marcus as a whole person. They saw him as a driver, a body behind a wheel, a pair of hands to open doors. But if you looked closely, really looked, you would notice something unusual. His uniform was always press sharp, even though it was second-hand. His shoes were polished to a mirror shine, even though the soles were worn thin. His posture was too straight for someone who was supposed to disappear. When he walked, there was a rhythm to his steps, a kind of deliberate grace that did not belong to a man who had given up. His face was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of a story no one had bothered to ask about. The trouble was this: Marcus worked for a woman who did not just look down on people. She needed to. Her name was Victoria Sterling. Victoria was rich, sharp-tongued, and ruthless. She loved imported wine, European designers, and being called Mrs. Sterling with just the right amount of fear in the voice. She loved it even more when people needed her, because it reminded her how powerful she was. She owned one of the most exclusive real estate firms in California, selling multi-million-dollar estates to tech moguls, actors, and old money families. In Victoria's world, everything had a price tag: houses, friendships, even human beings. And in that world, Marcus was worth less than the marble floors he walked on. That morning, Marcus stood outside her sprawling Malibu estate next to a black Range Rover that looked like it cost more than most people's homes. The driveway was long and lined with palm trees. The gate was white, tall, and electric. The lawn looked like it had been cut with scissors. Marcus checked his watch, then wiped an invisible smudge from the car's side mirror with a microfiber cloth. It wasn't dirty, but he wiped it anyway. Then he heard it, the click of heels on stone, fast and impatient. "Are you deaf?" Victoria's voice sliced through the morning air like glass breaking. "Why is the car not running? I said we're leaving at 7:30. Marcus turned quickly, his face neutral. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling." "Good morning," she snapped, adjusting her oversized sunglasses, even though the sun had barely risen. "Do I look like I'm in the mood for pleasantries? If I'm late to this meeting because of you, you'll be looking for another job by lunch?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said quietly. Victoria looked him up and down like she was inspecting damaged goods. "And what is that?" She gestured toward his chest. "Is that the only uniform you own? You look like you borrowed it from a bellhop." Marcus glanced down at his uniform. It was clean. It was neat. It fit him well. "It's clean, ma'am," he said softly. Victoria let out a sharp laugh, the kind that had no joy in it. "Clean isn't the same as presentable, Marcus. You people never understand that. Clean can still scream cheap." Marcus opened the back door without a word. Victoria slid inside, crossing her legs and immediately pulling out her phone. As Marcus moved to the driver's seat, her phone rang. She answered it with a smile that transformed her entire face. "Hello, darling," she sang, her voice suddenly warm and sugary. Yes, I'm on my way now. You know how LA traffic is, absolutely unbearable. My driver is going to earn his paycheck today." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel for just a second. Then he released them. He pulled out of the driveway, smooth and steady. Inside the car, Victoria's voice filled the space like expensive perfume. Loud, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. No. "Don't worry about me," she said into the phone. "This deal is as good as done. My clients don't work with amateurs." She paused, then glanced at Marcus through the rearview mirror, like he was an example of exactly that. "Yes, I still have the same driver," she continued. I know, but you know what they say? Staff are like furniture. You use them until they fall apart, then you replace them. Marcus kept his eyes on the Pacific Coast Highway. The ocean glittered to his left. Victoria's voice droned on to his right. After a few minutes, she ended the call and started scrolling through her phone. Then she began typing rapidly, a small smile creeping across her lips. Marcus recognized that smile. It was the smile she wore when she was planning something cruel. They arrived at a sleek glass building in Beverly Hills. Victoria stepped out and smoothed her dress, emerald green, designer, cut to make a statement. She didn't say thank you. She never did. She simply held out her hand. "Bring my portfolio," she ordered. "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said, retrieving it from the seat. They entered the lobby. People turned. "Good morning, Mrs. Sterling," a receptionist said quickly. "Welcome back." Victoria nodded like a queen acknowledging servants. Then she glanced at Marcus and hissed under her breath, "Stay behind me. Don't crowd my presence." Marcus took a step back. A man in an expensive suit approached. "Mrs. Sterling, your clients are waiting in the boardroom?" "Perfect," Victoria said. "Let's not keep them." As they stepped into the elevator, another woman entered, tall, polished, dripping in gold jewelry. She looked at Victoria and smiled. "Victoria Sterling," the woman said warmly. Victoria's face lit up like a stage light. "Clarissa, darling, how are you?" They embraced, laughing like old friends. Then Clarissa's eyes drifted to Marcus. "Is this your driver?" she asked, the way someone might ask if a car had heated seats. "Yes," Victoria said, waving her hand dismissively. "That's him." Clarissa studied Marcus's face, then his uniform, then his shoes. He's quiet," Victoria scoffed. "Quiet because he has nothing to say. What would a driver know about our world? His job is to drive and stay silent." Marcus stood still, eyes forward, breathing steady. Clarissa leaned closer to Victoria, lowering her voice just enough to pretend Marcus couldn't hear. "I hope he doesn't, smell. Some of them do." Victoria laughed, loud, cutting, cruel. "If he does, I'll just crack the window." Marcus's jaw tightened for half a second. Then he swallowed it down. The elevator opened. They stepped into a marble hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Victoria entered a conference room where 3 people waited. Tailored suits, designer watches, the kind of people who talked in millions. "Good morning, everyone," Victoria said brightly. "So sorry for the delay. Los Angeles traffic is a nightmare." One of the men chuckled. "No worries. Please, sit." Victoria sat and launched into her pitch, confident, commanding, calculated. Marcus stood by the door, holding her portfolio, invisible. 15 minutes later, Victoria's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and answered with irritation in her voice. "Yes?" Her expression shifted. "Oh, babe, I'm in a meeting. Can I?" She listened. Fine, I'll call you back." She ended the call and turned sharply to Marcus. "Why didn't you remind me I had another call scheduled?" Marcus blinked. "You didn't tell me, Mom." "Are you talking back to me?" Victoria snapped. The clients exchanged glances. Victoria forced a smile. "Apologies. Minor staff issue." Then she leaned close to Marcus and whispered with venom, "Don't you ever embarrass me in front of important people. Do you understand me?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said. When the meeting ended, they returned to the car. Victoria walked ahead like she was trying to outrun her own anger. Once inside, she started again. "This is why I can't stand working with people like you," she said, tossing her phone onto the seat. "You're always a step behind." Marcus didn't respond. Victoria looked at him through the mirror. "Are you upset?" "No, ma'am." "Good," she said coldly, "because being upset doesn't change facts. Your life is what it is." Marcus's throat moved. He kept driving. Later that afternoon, they stopped at Rodeo Drive. Victoria met two friends, Clarissa and another woman named Simone. Both wore outfits that cost more than a month's rent. Marcus followed behind them, carrying shopping bags. As they walked, the women talked about galas, yachts, and men who owned both. Their laughter echoed off the boutique windows. Simone pointed at a dress in a storefront. "This is what I want for your party." Victoria's eyes sparkled. "My party is going to be legendary, bigger than last year." Clarissa smiled. "Of course it will. You're Victoria Sterling." Victoria touched her chest. "Exactly. This party needs to make waves. I want every influencer, every CEO, every person who matters to be talking about it." Simone laughed. "Then invite the right people. No boring middle-class types." Victoria nodded. "Only the elite." Clarissa glanced back at Marcus, who stood silently holding 6 designer bags. "Your driver is still following you around like a shadow." Victoria turned and looked at Marcus like he was a stain on the sidewalk. "Marcus," she called. "Yes, ma'am." "Are you tired?" she asked with false sweetness. "No, ma'am, of course you're not," Victoria said to her friends. "He has nothing else in his life. This is his entire world." The women laughed. Marcus stood still. He didn't laugh. He didn't frown. He just waited. They entered another store. Victoria tried on shoes. Clarissa tried on sunglasses. Simone sprayed perfume. They kept talking, and every word felt like a small stone thrown at someone who couldn't throw back. As they left the store, Victoria's phone buzzed. She checked it and smiled, that same dangerous smile. Simone noticed. "What are you smiling about?" Victoria raised her phone. "My party plan just got even better." Clarissa leaned in. "Tell us." Victoria looked around like she was sharing a secret. Then she said, "I'm gonna do something hilarious this year, something no one will forget." Simone grinned. "Like what?" Victoria glanced at Marcus. Then she lowered her voice, but not low enough. "I'm going to invite Marcus to my golden glitter garden party." Clarissa's mouth fell open. "Your driver?" "Yes," Victoria said, laughing. "Imagine him standing there among my millionaire guests. Imagine the look on his face when he realizes he doesn't belong." Simone burst out laughing. "That's cruel," Victoria shrugged. "It's entertainment. Let him see how the other half lives. Maybe it'll teach him his place." Clarissa clapped her hands. "I love it. We'll all watch," Simone added. "He'll probably spill something or say the wrong thing." Victoria's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. And when he embarrasses himself, I'll just smile and say, 'Don't worry, everyone. He's just my driver.'" Marcus stood there, holding the bags, hearing every word. Victoria turned to him suddenly, as if she'd just remembered he was human. "Marcus?" "Yes, ma'am." She smiled like a cat. "My garden party is next Saturday. You're invited." Marcus blinked once. The women leaned forward, waiting for panic. But Marcus didn't panic. He didn't beg. He didn't ask why. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you, ma'am." The women froze. It wasn't the reaction they wanted. Victoria's smile tightened. "You'll come, won't you?" "Yes, ma'am," Marcus said calmly. Simone frowned. "He's acting like it's normal." Clarissa laughed nervously. "Maybe he doesn't understand what kind of party it is." Victoria waved her hand like it didn't matter, but her eyes stayed on Marcus's face. "Fine," she said. "Just make sure you don't embarrass me. Dress appropriately. Don't show up looking like you." Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am." Victoria turned and walked toward the car, her friends following, still laughing, still excited about the joke they thought was coming. Marcus slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. As he drove them back through the hills, the women kept talking about the party, who would attend, what Marcus would do, how entertaining it would be. But Marcus didn't join their laughter. He just drove. His face stayed calm, yet inside him, something ancient and powerful was waking up. Something Victoria Sterling had no idea existed. existed. And as the sun began to set over the Pacific, casting golden light across the city, Marcus's eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead, like a man who had already decided exactly what he would do next. Welcome to Cold Fusion family. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button right now, because this story is about to take you on a ride you won't forget. To my day one subscribers, my real ones who've been here from the start, I love y'all. Thank you for showing up every single time. Before we jump in, let me pray over you real quick. God, I'm asking you right now to bless every single person watching this. Cover them with your protection. Bless their family, their health, their finances. Give them peace in the storm and strength when they feel weak. Let miracles happen in their life today, in Jesus' name. Amen. Now let's get into it, because what you're about to hear isn't just a story about revenge. This is about what happens when you call someone trash in front of millionaires, and one of them offers him $1 million contract on the spot. This is about a man who went from Paris runways to luxury driveways, a woman who couldn't see the diamond she was standing on, and the moment karma stopped watching and started acting. Marcus kept a photograph hidden in his wallet, tucked behind his driver's license, where no one would accidentally see it. He didn't look at it often. Looking at it hurt in a way that had no name, but on certain mornings, when Victoria's voice cut deeper than usual, when the weight of his uniform felt heavier than it should, Marcus would pull out that photograph and stare at the man he used to be. In the photo, he stood under lights so bright they looked like fallen stars. The runway stretched behind him like a road to somewhere important. He wore a tailored charcoal suit that fit like a second skin, his shoulders back, his chin high, his eyes locked on something beyond the camera. The audience was a blur of faces, but Marcus remembered their expressions clearly. Awe, admiration, hunger. They had looked at him like he mattered, like he was art come to life. That was Paris 4 years ago, before his father's illness, before the medical bills that swallowed everything, before the debt. Collectors started calling at 3 in the morning, before Marcus traded runways for driveways and became invisible. Now he stood in Victoria's garage at 6 in the morning, a bucket of soapy water beside him, polishing the side mirror of her Range Rover. The chrome reflected his face back at him, older now, tired in places that didn't used to be tired. He wiped the mirror in slow circles, the same way he used to practice his runway walk. Deliberate, controlled, precise. You missed a spot, Victoria's voice echoed from the doorway. She stood there in a silk robe, holding a coffee cup that cost more than Marcus made in a week. The passenger side. I can see streaks. Marcus turned. There were no streaks. There never were. But he nodded anyway. I'll fix it, ma'am. Victoria sipped her coffee and watched him like she was watching a show. You know, Marcus, I sometimes wonder what you did before this. Were you always a driver? Marcus's hand froze for half a second on the hood of the car. Then he resumed wiping. I did different work, ma'am. Different work, Victoria repeated, amused. How vague. Well, whatever it was, it clearly didn't work out. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Marcus, the party is this Saturday. Don't forget. I want you there by noon. The guests arrive at 2. Yes, ma'am. When she left, Marcus set down the cloth. He pulled out his wallet, opened it, and stared at the photograph one more time. The man in that picture looked like a stranger now, but the eyes were the same. Marcus closed the wallet and slipped it back into his pocket. Then he returned to the car, polishing the hood until it shined like a mirror, reflecting a sky he could see but couldn't touch. Not yet. Victoria had spent 3 weeks planning the party, but only 30 seconds deciding what Marcus would wear to it. Saturday morning arrived with cloudless skies and ocean breezes that smelled like salt and money. The estate's garden had been transformed overnight. White tents stretched across the lawn like sails. Crystal chandeliers hung from wooden beams, and tables draped in gold cloth glittered under the California sun. Caterers in crisp uniforms moved like choreographed dancers. A string quartet tuned their instruments near the fountain. Everything was perfect expensive, designed to make people feel like they'd entered a different world. Victoria stood on the terrace in a flowing white gown that probably cost more than a small car, surveying her kingdom with satisfaction. Then she remembered Marcus. "Marcus!" she called sharply. He appeared from the side entrance, dressed in his usual driver's uniform, clean, pressed, respectful. Victoria's face twisted with displeasure. "No, no, no, that won't do. You can't wear that." Marcus blinked. "Ma'am, you're a guest today, remember?" Victoria smiled, but it was the smile of a cat cornering a mouse. "Guests don't wear driver uniforms. I had something special made for you." She handed him a garment bag. Marcus took it, his expression carefully neutral. "Go change," Victoria ordered. "Quickly, guests arrive in an hour." Marcus walked to the staff bathroom and unzipped the bag. What he found inside made his stomach turn. It was a uniform, but not like any uniform he'd ever seen. The jacket was too short in the sleeves, stopping awkwardly above his wrists. The pants were too tight in some places, too loose in others, like they'd been deliberately mismeasured. The fabric was cheap polyester that looked shiny under light, the kind that screamed costume store rather than tailor. Across the chest, embroidered in oversized gold letters, was a single word: staff. Marcus stared at it for a long moment. He understood immediately what this was. This wasn't a uniform, it was a costume, a joke, a way to make sure everyone at the party knew exactly where he stood in Victoria's hierarchy. He could refuse. He could walk out right now, get in his car, drive away, and never look back. But something stopped him. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was something deeper. A quiet voice that whispered, "Let her play her game. Let's see who wins." Marcus put on the uniform. It fit exactly as badly as it looked. The sleeves exposed his wrists. The collar sat awkward on his neck. The word staff blazed across his chest like a warning label. He looked at himself in the mirror. The uniform was designed to make him look small, ridiculous, out of place. But Marcus stood up straight anyway. He adjusted the collar. He smoothed the fabric. He lifted his chin. The uniform was ugly, but the man wearing it was not. When Marcus stepped back outside, Victoria was waiting. Her eyes lit up with cruel delight. "Perfect," she said, looking him up and down like he was exactly what she'd ordered. "Now you look the part." Marcus said nothing. He simply nodded once and took his place near the garden entrance, his face calm, his shoulders back, standing like a man who knew something Victoria Sterling had not yet learned. The guests would arrive soon, and the game would begin. They arrived in cars that cost more than houses, and they moved through Victoria's garden like people who owned the very air they breathed. The first was a tech mogul in a linen suit, his wife dripping in diamonds that caught the sunlight and threw it back in sharp bursts. Then came a film producer, a venture capitalist, a celebrity attorney, a real estate developer who'd just closed a $50 million deal in Beverly Hills. They kissed Victoria's cheeks, complimented her dress, and accepted champagne from silver trays carried by silent waiters. Marcus stood near the entrance, exactly where Victoria had positioned him, visible enough to be useful, but far enough from the main guests to remain beneath notice. "Marcus!" Victoria called, her voice sugary sweet for the benefit of her audience. "Come here, darling." Marcus walked over. Victoria stood in a circle with 4 women, all dressed like they were attending a royal wedding. They held champagne flutes and designer handbags that probably had waiting lists. "Hold this," Victoria said, handing Marcus her purse. Then, without warning, she placed another bag on top of it. Then another. "Oh, and Simone, give him yours too. His arms are free." The women laughed as Marcus's arms filled with leather and logos. "Actually," Victoria said, her eyes sparkling with mischief, "I have a better idea." She looked down at the grass, then at Marcus. "Kneel down." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, the grass is wet from the sprinklers this morning," Victoria said loudly, making sure everyone nearby could hear. I don't want to ruin my heels. Kneel down so I can rest my bag on your back while I fix my shoe. The circle of women went quiet, their smiles frozen in place. A few guests nearby turned to watch. Marcus looked at Victoria, really looked at her. He could see it in her eyes. She wanted him to refuse. She wanted him to react, to give her a reason to humiliate him further, to call him disrespectful in front of her millionaire friends. So Marcus did the one thing she didn't expect. He knelt. The bags rested on his back. Victoria placed her foot on the edge of his shoulder, adjusting her heel strap. The women watched, some uncomfortable, some amused, none willing to say a word. "You see," Victoria said casually, as if Marcus were a piece of furniture, "this is the problem with uneducated labor. No ambition, no drive. They're content to stay exactly where they are." She paused. "Honestly, I think some people are just born to serve." One of the women, a redhead in a yellow dress, laughed nervously. "Victoria, that's a bit harsh, don't you think?" Victoria shrugged. "I'm just being honest. Marcus doesn't mind. Do you, Marcus?" Marcus stayed silent, his knees pressed into the damp grass, his back straight despite the weight of the bags. "See," Victoria said, removing her foot and taking her purse back. "He doesn't mind at all. You can get up now, Marcus." Marcus rose slowly, his white gloves stained green at the knees, his face still calm. He brushed off the grass quietly and stepped back. Victoria turned to her friends, already laughing about something else, already moving on. But across the garden, standing near the fountain with a glass of sparkling water in his hand, a man in a tailored navy suit watched the entire exchange. His name was Julian Vance, and he had seen everything. The accident happened so fast that later people would argue about who was actually at fault. A woman in a red dress, someone's wife, someone's +1, someone who'd had 3 glasses of champagne on an empty stomach, turned too quickly while laughing at a joke. Her glass tipped, the contents spilled, and the cold liquid hit Marcus square in the chest, soaking through the cheap polyester uniform and spreading across the gold letters that spelled staff. The woman gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." Marcus looked down at the stain, dark, wet, spreading. He could feel everyone's eyes on him. The string quartet had stopped playing. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the breeze seemed to pause. "It's all right," Marcus said quietly, reaching for a napkin from a nearby table. "It was an accident." "No, it's not all right." Victoria's voice cut through the garden like a whip crack. She pushed through the crowd, her white gown flowing behind her, her face twisted with fury that seemed too large for the situation. "Look at what you've done. Look at this mess." The woman in red stammered. I didn't mean to." "Not you," Victoria snapped, pointing at Marcus. "Him. Look at him standing there, dripping all over my lawn. Do you know how much this grass costs to maintain?" She turned to face her guests, her voice rising. "This is exactly what I was talking about. Give people an opportunity, invite them into your world, and they still manage to ruin everything." Marcus stood perfectly still, napkin in hand, saying nothing. Victoria stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You're staining the grass with your presence, Marcus. Actually staining it." She laughed, high and sharp. "This is why people like you don't belong in places like this. She paused, searching for the word that would cut deepest. "You're trash. That's what you are. Trash in a cheap uniform, ruining my party." The garden went silent, completely, utterly silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Marcus's hands, still holding the damp napkin, trembled once, just once. Then they steadied. He looked at Victoria, not with anger, not with shame, but with something else, something quiet and ancient and unbreakable. "Yes, ma'am," he said softly. Victoria blinked, clearly expecting more, expecting tears or rage or some kind of breakdown that would justify what she'd just said. But Marcus gave her nothing. Instead, something unexpected happened. As Marcus bent down to pick up the fallen glass, his movements changed. The way he crouched, low, balanced, graceful, wasn't the movement of a servant. It was the movement of someone who knew exactly how their body worked in space. Someone trained, someone who'd stood under lights and cameras and knew that every gesture mattered. He picked up the glass with one hand, the napkin with the other, and rose in a single fluid motion that looked almost choreographed. His spine straightened, his shoulders rolled back, his chin lifted. For just a moment the cheap uniform disappeared, the stain disappeared, and standing there in Victoria's garden, Marcus looked exactly like what he used to be, a star. Across the lawn, Julian Vance set down his water glass and started walking toward the center of the crowd. Something inside Marcus broke when Victoria called him trash. But what broke wasn't his spirit. It was the chain he'd wrapped around himself. The one that said, "Stay small." The one that whispered, "Don't remind them who you used to be." The one that kept his head down and his past hidden. That chain snapped clean in half, and what emerged was the man he'd buried 4 years ago. Marcus stood up from picking up the glass, and everything about the way he moved changed. His spine didn't just straighten, it lengthened, pulling his frame upward like a tree reaching for light. His shoulders rolled back and settled into place with the unconscious confidence of someone who'd spent years learning exactly where their body belonged in space. His chin lifted, not in defiance, but in the natural posture of someone accustomed to being watched, studied, photographed. His feet repositioned, weight balanced, stance widened just slightly, the foundation of a runway walk that had once hypnotized crowds in Milan and Paris. The guests closest to him stopped mid-conversation. Something had shifted. They couldn't name it, but they felt it. Marcus bent down again to pick up the napkin he'd dropped. And the movement was pure poetry. He didn't crouch like a servant. He moved like a dancer, like an athlete, like someone who understood that even the smallest gesture could be art. His hand extended with deliberate grace, fingers precise, wrist angled just so. When he rose again, it was in one continuous motion, fluid, controlled, effortless. He turned toward the spilled champagne pooling on the stone pathway, and as he walked those 3 steps, heads turned. The cheap uniform couldn't hide it anymore. The 2 short sleeves, the garish gold lettering, the stained fabric. None of it mattered, because the man wearing it moved like royalty. Marcus knelt beside the puddle with a fresh napkin, and even that simple act looked intentional. He pressed the cloth against the stone in slow, methodical circles, his movements measured and calm. His back remained straight. His neck held that impossible line between relaxed and regal. The white gloves, still grass-stained from earlier, somehow looked elegant now, like they were part of a deliberate aesthetic choice. A woman near the fountain whispered to her husband, "Who is that?" Her husband frowned. I think that's the driver." That can't be the driver, but it was. And as Marcus finished cleaning, folded the soiled napkin into a precise square, and rose one final time, the garden had gone completely still. Even Victoria had stopped talking, her mouth slightly open, her expression caught between confusion and something that looked almost like fear. Marcus turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers with quiet intensity. He didn't smile, he didn't speak, he simply stood there, 6 feet of controlled power in a ridiculous uniform, looking like he could walk onto any stage in the world and own it. Victoria opened her mouth to say something cruel, something cutting, something to regain control. But before she could speak, a voice came from behind her. "Excuse me," the voice said, smooth and authoritative. "I need to speak with that young man." Everyone turned. Julian Vance stepped forward, his navy suit impeccable, his silver hair catching the sunlight. His eyes locked on Marcus like he'd just discovered buried treasure. "Right now," Julian added, "if you don't mind." Julian Vance didn't ask permission to interrupt. He simply claimed the space like someone who'd been doing it his entire life. He walked through the crowd with the kind of quiet authority that made people step aside without being asked. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, his silver hair combed back in a way that suggested old money and older confidence. He moved past tech billionaires and film producers like they were furniture, his eyes never leaving Marcus. Victoria recovered first, her social instincts kicking in. She smoothed her dress, fixed her smile, and stepped directly into Julian's path with the practiced grace of someone used to being the center of attention. "Mr. Vance," she purred, extending her hand. "I'm so glad you could make it. I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk about that property in—" Julian walked past her like she was air. Victoria's smile froze. Her hand hung suspended in empty space. A few guests gasped quietly. Julian stopped directly in front of Marcus, close enough that Marcus could see the expensive watch on his wrist, the slight wrinkles around his eyes that came from decades of studying faces for a living. Julian tilted his head slightly, examining Marcus the way an art dealer examines a painting. "What's your name?" Julian asked. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. "Marcus, sir." "Marcus," Julian repeated, tasting the word. "How long have you been working as a driver?" "4 years, sir." Julian nodded slowly, his eyes moving from Marcus's face to his shoulders, to his posture, to the way his hands hung naturally at his sides. "And before that?" Marcus hesitated. The garden was silent now, everyone watching, everyone listening. Victoria stood off to the side, her face a mask of confusion and anger. "I worked in fashion, sir," Marcus said quietly. "In Europe?" Julian's eyes sharpened. "Fashion? Modeling?" "Yes, sir." A slow smile spread across Julian's face. Not mocking, not amused, but satisfied, like a man who'd just confirmed a theory he'd been developing. "I knew it," he said softly. "I knew it the moment I saw you move." He took a step closer. "I've been looking for that face for 3 years." Marcus's breath caught. "Sir, that bone structure," Julian continued, gesturing toward Marcus's face. "That walk, that presence. You can't teach what you have. You either have it or you don't. And you—" He paused, his voice dropping lower. "You have it in spades." Victoria finally found her voice. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance, but Marcus is my employee. If you need something—" "I'm not talking to you," Julian said without turning around. His eyes stayed locked on Marcus. "I'm talking to him." The insult landed like a slap. Victoria's face flushed red. A few guests exchanged shocked glances. Julian pulled a business card from his jacket pocket and held it out to Marcus. "Julian Vance, International Talent Scout. I represent the biggest luxury brands in the world. Versace, Armani, Tom Ford. They're all looking for faces that tell stories." He paused. "Faces like yours." Marcus took the card with trembling fingers. The paper felt heavy, expensive, real. "I want you to call me," Julian said. "Tomorrow. We need to talk about your future. The real one, not this." He gestured at the cheap uniform, the garden, the party. Victoria. Marcus stared at the card, then at Julian, then at his own reflection in the fountain behind them. A man in a stained, ill-fitting uniform holding a piece of paper that might change everything. "Yes, sir," Marcus whispered. Julian smiled. "Good." Then he turned and walked away, leaving Victoria, speechless, and Marcus standing in the center of the garden, still holding the glass in one hand and possibility in the other. Victoria's control was slipping through her fingers like water, and she knew it. So she did what cornered animals always do. She attacked. "Wait," Victoria said sharply, her voice cutting through the murmurs that had erupted across the garden. She stepped forward, positioning herself between Julian and Marcus like a barrier. "I'm sorry, Mr. Vance, but there seems to be some confusion here." Her smile was bright and brittle. "Marcus is under contract with me, an employment contract, legally binding." Julian stopped walking. He turned slowly, one eyebrow raised in what might have been amusement or pity. "Is that so?" "Yes," Victoria said, gaining confidence now, her voice rising so everyone could hear. "He signed a 2-year agreement when I hired him. He still has 8 months remaining." She crossed her arms. "So whatever offer you're making, I'm afraid it's not possible. Not without my permission?" The crowd shifted uncomfortably. This was getting messy now, crossing from entertainment into something uglier. Marcus stood frozen, the business card still in his hand, watching his future and his past fight over him like he was property. Julian looked at Victoria for a long moment. Then he did something unexpected. He laughed. Not cruelly, not mockingly, just genuinely amused, like she'd told a joke that didn't quite land. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his tone the kind of patient you'd use with a child, "do you know what I do for a living?" Victoria's smile wavered. "You're a talent scout." "I'm a deal maker," Julian corrected. "I negotiate contracts worth millions of dollars. I convince fashion houses to bet their entire seasonal campaigns on faces nobody's heard of yet. I've bought out contracts from modeling agencies, sports teams, and Fortune 500 companies." He paused. "So, let me ask you something. How much do you think your little employment contract is worth to me?" Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. Julian pulled out his phone. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell me exactly how much Marcus owes you for the remainder of his contract. And I'm going to wire you that amount right now, plus 20% for your trouble." He looked at Marcus. "And then I'm going to offer Marcus here a signing bonus of $1 million to be the face of a luxury campaign I'm developing." The garden exploded into whispers. $1 million. The number hung in the air like a spell. Victoria's face went white. $1 million, Julian finished. "Yes, that's what someone with his look is worth. To the right people. People who understand value." He glanced at Victoria. "Clearly you don't." The insult was surgical, precise, devastating. A few guests gasped. One woman covered her mouth. Victoria stammered, This is ridiculous. Marcus is a driver. He's a model," Julian said flatly, "who you've been wasting for 4 years. He turned to Marcus, his voice softening. "The question isn't what she wants. The question is, what do you want?" Every eye in the garden turned to Marcus, the man in the stained uniform, the man Victoria had called trash, the man holding a business card in one hand and his entire future in the other. Marcus looked at Victoria, really looked at her, saw the fear behind her anger, the desperation behind her cruelty. He could almost feel sorry for her, almost. Then he looked at Julian and smiled. "I want to be free," Marcus said quietly. Julian nodded. "Then you will be." He turned to Victoria. "Send me the contract details. You'll have your money by Monday." Victoria stood there, her mouth opening and closing, her perfect party dissolving around her, powerless to stop what she'd started. Marcus had been invisible for 4 years, but his exit would be seen by everyone. He stood in the center of Victoria's garden, still wearing the uniform she'd designed to humiliate him, still holding Julian Vance's business card, surrounded by millionaires who'd watched him be called trash just minutes ago. The champagne had stopped flowing. The string quartet had given up pretending to play. Even the ocean breeze seemed to pause, waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus reached into his pocket slowly and pulled out a set of keys, the Range Rover keys, the ones he'd carried every day for 4 years, the ones he'd used to drive Victoria to meetings and shopping trips and parties where she paraded him like a prop. He held them up, the metal catching the afternoon sun, glinting like a small surrender. Then he walked toward Victoria. She stood rigid, her white dress somehow looking less bright than it had an hour ago, her face a complicated mixture of anger and something that might have been shame if she'd known how to feel it. Her friends had created a protective semicircle around her, but they parted as Marcus approached, none of them willing to stand between whatever was about to happen. Marcus stopped 2 feet away from her, close enough to speak quietly, close enough that she'd have to look at him, really look at him, one last time. "Mrs. Sterling," he said, his voice calm and clear and unbearably polite. He extended his hand, the keys resting on his palm like an offering. "I won't be needing these anymore." Victoria stared at the keys, then at him, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Marcus waited, patient still, a man who'd learned long ago that silence could be louder than shouting. Finally, Victoria snatched the keys from his hand, her fingers trembling slightly. You can't just—" "I can," Marcus said gently. "Mr. Vance is buying out my contract. You'll have the money by Monday. Until then—" He paused, and something flickered in his eyes, something that might have been satisfaction or sadness or both. "I'm done." He took a step back, creating distance. Then he looked around the garden, at the crystal chandeliers, the gold tablecloths, the millionaires in their designer clothes, the world Victoria had built to prove she was better than everyone else. He took it all in one last time, then his eyes returned to Victoria, and he spoke his final words to her in a voice that carried across the entire lawn. "The trash is leaving, madam." The sentence landed like a gavel, final, irreversible, perfect. Victoria's face went pale. Someone in the crowd gasped. Another person, maybe it was the woman in the red dress, let out a small, involuntary laugh that she tried to cover with her hand. Marcus didn't wait for a response. He turned, his spine straight, his shoulders back, and walked toward the garden exit, not quickly, not slowly, but with that same fluid grace that had caught Julian's attention. Each step deliberate, each movement controlled, a man leaving on his own terms. The crowd parted for him like a sea. As Marcus reached the gate, he pulled off the white gloves, the ones stained with grass and champagne, and dropped them in a trash bin by the entrance. Then he walked through the gate and didn't look back. Behind him, Victoria stood frozen in the center of her perfect party, holding car keys she no longer needed, surrounded by people who would never look at her the same way again. 6 months after Victoria's party, Marcus's face appeared on a billboard so large it could be seen from 3 different freeways. The campaign was for a luxury watch brand, the kind advertised during the Super Bowl, the kind celebrities wore to award shows, the kind that cost more than most people's annual salary. In the photograph, Marcus stood against a black background, wearing a tailored tuxedo, his wrist angled just enough to catch the light on the watch face, his expression confident and serene. The tagline read, "Time reveals everything." The billboard went up on Sunset Boulevard first, then Fifth Avenue in New York, then Champs-Élysées in Paris. Marcus's face became inescapable, on magazine covers, in airport terminals, on the sides of buses. Within 3 months, he'd walked runways in Milan and London. Within 6, he'd appeared in a music video that went viral. The world that had forgotten him remembered why they'd loved him in the first place. Victoria saw the billboard on a Tuesday morning while riding a bus to a meeting she couldn't afford to miss. She sat near the back, squeezed between a college student and a man in paint-stained coveralls, and when the bus turned onto Sunset Boulevard, there it was, Marcus, 40 feet tall, impossibly handsome, wearing a watch that cost more than the car she'd sold 3 months ago to pay rent. Victoria stared at it until the bus turned and the billboard disappeared from view. That evening, she sat in her small apartment, not the Malibu estate which she'd been forced to sell after her business collapsed and her wealthy friends stopped returning calls, and found the magazine on her coffee table. Vogue, the cover story, From Driver to Icon, Marcus Chen's Unstoppable Rise. She opened it with trembling hands. The photos were stunning. Marcus on a rooftop at sunset. Marcus in Paris wearing couture. Marcus laughing with other models, looking relaxed and happy and free. The article quoted him once. "I spent years thinking my worth was tied to my circumstances. It took hitting bottom to remember that seasons change. The only question is whether you'll still be standing when they do." Victoria closed the magazine slowly. She looked around her apartment, the cheap furniture, the cracked ceiling, the stack of unpaid bills on the counter. She thought about the party, about the uniform she'd ordered specifically to humiliate him, about the word she'd screamed in front of everyone. Trash. She'd called him trash while he stood in her garden, quiet and dignified, carrying a past she'd never bothered to ask about and a future she couldn't have imagined. She'd mocked his struggle. She'd celebrated his invisibility. She'd turned his humiliation into entertainment. And now she sat alone in a small apartment, looking at his face on a magazine cover, learning the lesson that comes too late for those who learn it. Your current season is not your permanent identity. What you are today is not what you'll be tomorrow. And those who mock your struggle will eventually have to watch your success, not as participants, not as supporters, but as witnesses to a story they could have been part of if only they'd had the decency to see the person standing in front of them. Victoria set the magazine down and turned off the light. Outside, the city glowed, and somewhere in it Marcus was shining brighter than he ever had before. If you take nothing else from Marcus's story, remember this: the true test of character is never how you treat your equals or superiors. It's how you treat those you believe have nothing to offer you. Victoria didn't fall because she was wealthy. She fell because she mistook a person's temporary position for their permanent worth. She saw a uniform and missed the man wearing it. She saw someone serving her and assumed they existed only to serve. That blindness cost her everything. But here's what Marcus understood that Victoria never did. Your current season is not your final destination. The person pouring your coffee today might own the company tomorrow. The employee you dismiss might become the boss who decides your future. The nobody you ignore might be the somebody the world is waiting to discover. So treat people well, not because of what they can do for you, but because of who you choose to be. Character isn't tested when cameras are watching. It's tested in the small moments when you think no one important is paying attention. Those are the moments that define you, and eventually everyone finds out who you really are. Everyone has a story you haven't heard, and the wisdom to know that how you treat people when they're down reveals everything about who you really are. That's the kind of strength that changes lives. Thank you for watching to the end. If Marcus's story moved you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss new episodes every week. Which moment hit you hardest? The trash comment, the contract offer, or Marcus walking away? Tell me in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video so the algorithm knows you want more stories of justice and redemption. And if you're watching from a specific city, drop your location below. I love seeing how far this family reaches.